What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Stream Kings with your boys, Money Mike, Danny D. Back at it
Hey,
again.
hey, Money Mike.
That's
Can't
what they
believe you're
call me.
still running with that, but
Listen, I can't just be Black Widow like you named me back in the day. So,
yeah, I don't understand why you can't, though.
I mean, I guess I could. I feel like I'd have a lot of explaining to do, though.
No, you don't. You don't have to explain yourself.
All right, well,
That's
let's
the fun
share
part.
it.
Like, why do they call you Black Widow? Don't worry about it, man.
That's pretty punk rock of me.
Exactly.
All right, let's hop right in. So today, Daniel and I, we wanted to do a different movie before we settled on this one. We were talking about doing Prometheus, which great movie. However, it was coming off of streaming services in like 5 days, and that seemed pretty not punk rock of us to do a movie that was going to be coming off of a streaming service when that's what our podcast is about. So,
You're like, guys, listen to how great this movie is. Now you have 20 minutes to go watch it.
got to watch it on like 5x speed.
Good luck.
And then the news about Carl Weathers came out, and we were like, oh, let's do Predator for our guy, and that was not available on streaming services. So here we are today, going to be talking about, I'd say, a similar movie. I think they're not rivals, right? But like, well, they were actually in a movie,
The
but
Yeah, I guess the protagonists, I guess, are, but I don't know. Contemporaries, I think, would be a better term. I don't know that
I,
they're.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Alien, the 1979 Ridley Scott classic.
In space, no one can hear you scream.
Which is a terrifying like thing to think about, which we'll talk about more of that later,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure.
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get there. So but yeah, so this movie, fantastic, holds up to this day. Some things I think find interesting. It made $184 million on only an $11 million budget, which I think is incredible. Like rewatching this movie, and I'm sure we both seen this movie many times, but
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty awesome what they're able to do on that budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say another thing that is also streaming that you need to check out at the end of this, if you're interested in this kind of thing, is Memory: The Origins of Alien, and they do a lot of behind the scenes. Um, it's a lot of history of like how they came up with the idea, like the original script, and all that kind of stuff. And like their original budget was like 2 million. And I don't really remember what exactly happened, but I think the studio increased it when they got Ridley Scott to direct.
Mm-hmm.
And then it jumped to like the 10 or 11 million. But you're right, either way. But starting with a budget of two, technically, and then
Mm-hmm.
being increased, but like pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive. Rotten Tomatoes, which again, not the end all be all, 93% and a 4.1 or 4.3, sorry, on Letterboxd. So, pretty well appreciated movie. So we think this is a great film. We'll talk a little bit more about it going in. So Dan, how are you introduced to this movie?
I can't tell you the exact. I don't remember when I first watched it. I'll say that,
Yeah.
but I do know that um, it would have been through my dad because my dad is actually
Mm-hmm.
also a really big fan of this movie.
Yeah.
Which is really strange because he doesn't, according to him, like horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
So, which the argument can be made that it's not one, but it has heavy horror elements.
For sure.
He won't watch Halloween. He won't watch Friday the 13th or anything like that. But he loves Alien. If you make it about monsters, he'll watch it. I don't know.
It's kind of interesting, like,
Yeah.
because I think this is probably scarier especially from like a psychological standpoint than probably either of those movies. But
Well,
I don't
yeah,
know.
like I think objectively that movie is worse than like a Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, 100%.
But like
But
I don't he doesn't seem to mind it as long as it's got sci-fi elements, I guess.
yeah, that's fair.
I guess you can tolerate it if it feels less horror because they're
Yeah,
monsters, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, he loves it, and I'm sure that the first time that I watched it was with him at some point, and we've watched it together many times since.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I also don't remember the first time I actually watched the movie, but I distinctly remember my very first trip to Walt Disney World and going to Hollywood Studios, back then MGM, and at the Great Movie Ride, they have a section, or had, RIP, Great Movie Ride, had a section on Alien. And I, as a 6, 7 year old going through that, I was I was terrified. Like, that's the first time I remember like having nightmares about really anything, probably. Like,
Hmm.
it was so spooky, just like the xenomorph like popping out of a couple different spots, and seeing Sigourney Weaver, and just like over there with her eyes like this, just like, oh my gosh, yeah, yeah, it got me. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, definitely don't remember the first time I watched it. But um, all right. So before we get too into, we have different categories, we have some awards we want to give out. But before we get to that, I have just some questions that popped up just while rewatching. And I don't know if you have any, but we can go back and forth and discuss. So, um,
Okay.
we might have to do some research, but how many like big movies really came out before this, like that just happened in space, right? Like, outside of like an old sci-fi movie, like the only ones I could really think about were like 2001 Space Odyssey and
Hmm.
like Star Wars, right? Those are the
Right.
big ones.
I think, yeah, and I think you're right. I think it was those two. Those were the two big ones, obviously, and I've got written down too. It was heavily influenced by a lot of like those, that 50s and 60s sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
wave, like Planet of the Vampires,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of different stuff. Um, but movies around that time with similar settings, I think it was just those two.
Yeah. And I think, talking about like based on those and everything, this was definitely like a different take on like the sci-fi genre, right? I think this is
Right.
definitely the first, like, I don't want to get too far ahead of something else that may come up later, but like the first real like sci-fi horror movie.
Hmm.
And I think, yeah, what they were able to do, what Ridley Scott was able to put together, I think was incredible. So,
Right. Because like 3 or 4 years later, John Carpenter does The Thing, which
mhm,
now is in retrospect a pretty well appreciated movie,
mhm.
rightly so. But like it bombed, man. Nobody went to see that movie
Yeah, I mean, people
at
didn't
the
really
time.
know. Yeah, this was new, I think, newish anyway, and if you look at like those two other big ones, like definitely different tones and feels for the movie, like
Hmm.
you know so I love that. I love kind of how they were able to take something different. um Kind of getting into some of like the subplot and everything, do you think, when I was rewatching, I never had caught on to the clause that they talked about when they're woken up and when they have to go like off course. Do you think that the clause that was written in, like, anytime if they get a distress signal, like, they have to deviate and answer to it, do you think that was written in intentionally, knowing that the xenomorph was there? Like, how much do you think that the big corporation knew about the xenomorph before the mission even began?
I kind of thought about that too, and I don't. I kind of I want to say no, but I also feel like they knew there was a possibility with how quickly they reacted when Ash was like, "We've got a life form," you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like even if they didn't bake in the even if they didn't know in advance, I feel like they had a protocol for like, if this happens, here's what we're gonna do, and you're gonna help us do it, Ash.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
And speaking of Ash, like, why didn't they just send out a bunch of androids to do this whole mission? Maybe one human, because it had to impregnate or whatever, like one actual human host. But like, I don't know. These are all
All
like
right,
little
Michael,
questions I was having.
you're getting into the weeds, man. It's the same as like, why didn't they just use the Eagles to take the ring to Mount Doom? There's
Is
no
there some
story there.
commentary? Is there some commentary on like horrible corporations there, or am I just going further into the weeds there?
No, no, I think you can, and there's some stuff I picked up from that documentary about, even in some ways, the movie itself is about, people encroaching upon and just diving right into things they don't understand,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like bullying of like the working man, like they're just a mining ship,
Mm-hmm.
but they're forced to deviate to look at something that's grossly out of their scope of practice,
Yeah.
and then are forced to just sort of deal with it, all
Mm-hmm.
because a corporation is like that is more valuable than all seven of your lives on board. Crew
Yeah. Yeah.
expendable.
Which is it's I don't know. It's super interesting because they had no idea what they were actually trying to capture, right?
Hmm.
Or trying to bring back, and apparently they didn't care because they made like how many more movies afterwards. They're like, oh, you know what? Let's still try to go get this thing.
Right.
So, but um, and I have one more very important question. Is this where your hate of cats began? Because Jones, the cat, sucks. Literally causes people to die. I just want to
I
know.
I I wrote that down as like Jones question mark. I wouldn't say this is where my hatred of cats began, but this has certainly reinforced it, And even too, it was like, why would you? Was the cat asleep? Did you waste a cryopod on a cat?
Yes, 100%. I
It feels like
mean,
a lot of resources. Like I feel like it takes a lot to put anything into stasis, and you
yeah,
choose to do it on a cat too.
yeah.
Also, there's an alarming amount of smoking inside of a spaceship.
It's a
Just
very
an
valid
insane amount of
observation.
smoking inside of what should not be smoked in, right?
And it more than just tobacco products. Like on the
Right.
rewatch, I was like, some of these guys are definitely smoking weed too. Like watching this, like that's a joint for sure.
Oh yeah,
But
Brett, the mechanic guy with the Hawaiian
mhm,
shirt, 100%
yeah,
rolling J's. I mean, or
but
his own cigarettes. I don't know, but
I guess it could be. I don't know. He seemed the flower shirt kind of makes me think it was more than just tobacco, but I
doesn't
don't
it?
know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, man, I was watching this movie and like Jones literally watches. I think it was Brett die in like the first one of the first like actual xenomorph kills, and
Hmm.
then almost like Sigourney Weaver, she's like literally carrying around a cat carrier at the very end of the movie, trying to escape the shutdown of the ship.
Oh, I
And
was like, just leave Jones. Like she was like walking around like Jones,
yeah,
Jonesy. I'm like, no,
yeah,
go,
yeah, get out of
go.
there. This
This
alarm
thing
is
has killed
scaring me.
multiple people, and you're trying to get this cat out of here. Oh my gosh.
It's the little things. So those are just some of the little questions that popped up while I rewatched. So anything else from you? Anything else you're like, I have some like token snips still to go, but
No, and I mean, you and I talked before. Like realistically, if you, I could talk about this for hours,
mm-hmm,
especially after watching this one, especially after the rewatch, and two, after watching that documentary on how it
mm-hmm.
was, like how it was made or whatever. So, but nothing especially pressing. So,
Okay, cool, cool, cool. So just some little snips, some things I noticed and like caught up on, and some of these are pretty quick. But the first guy to wake up and to die is Kane. I don't know if you'd ever noticed that before. He's the first one to wake up like out of the cryopod when they
mhm.
first wake up, and then he's the one who gets like I don't know. Impregnated sounds bad. I don't. What's the right like
Oh no, it's 100%. They 100% meant for it to come off
in that way?
sexual. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. 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 There's some other things. I don't know how much you want to get into that, but there are a lot of like overtones in this movie
You
for
don't
sure.
have to, but just know that like they did it on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
if they didn't, it's heavily implied.
Yeah.
in
I
multiple scenes for multiple things.
There's one more that I will bring up that I thought was pretty interesting. Also, just as a Disney cast member, and if any Disney maintenance people are listening to this, please don't be offended. But I love when they're first talking about like how long it's going to take to fix the ship, and then one guy's like, "Oh yeah, we probably do this in 17 hours," and then the next guy, Brett, was like, "No, 25." Like it's just like they're just going to add 8 more hours onto this job
Right.
just because.
Just tack on a full day's work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why
We'll
not?
make sure we get paid. Um, the claustrophobia. So this is a
Ooh,
big
yeah.
part of the movie. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I
Let
think
me say something after this. You go first, though.
no, I mine's very brief. I just like rewatching with the intention of trying to like catch up on some things. Like I just there are things I didn't catch on to, like just as a casual observer. But like as the movie progresses and goes on, like you feel that more and more and more. And I think the silence and some of like the weird noises of the ship and things that happen, like kind of build into that. And I just thought that, yeah, I don't know, they did they did a great job with it.
Yeah. And that's what I was gonna say too. Like as the movie goes, it really does get smaller and smaller. You know, like that
Mm-hmm.
first opening shot is of space,
Mm-hmm.
right? Planets, things like that, and then the ship. And then slowly as it goes on, it's like that first opening shot goes into the ship, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
then as it goes, it's like more and more the ship becomes inaccessible. They get relegated to certain rooms and things before finally, you know, Ripley's running through the corridors and is stuck on like the escape pod,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think that they also mentioned like it's filmed primarily by hand, you know. Um Ridley Scott I think shot they said like 80% of the movie like with like one of those Panavision cameras on his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Um which just kind of adds to the I think the claustrophobic feel to it.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Ridley Scott is a genius, so I'll watch anything he does. But um, skipping ahead. So in one of the conversations that Ash and oh my gosh, Ripley are having, Ash calls Xenomorph the perfect organism, and I think Ash is admiring its purity and survival abilities, which makes sense. Um, that Ash would be like in admiration of this because his chosen method of trying to kill Ripley is shoving a rolled up
Rolled up
magazine
magazine into her
down
mouth.
her
Yeah.
throat. I was like, my guy, you have like superhuman strength, it seems like, but you're gonna like choke her to death, make her choke on something. I
Mhm.
was like, all
Mhm.
right, yeah, yeah. No wonder you admire this creature, this being. Which another we're talking about some of the overtones there. There's one for sure. Although I found something interesting, and we'll talk about a little bit on this later, because like one little fun production thing. Um, also, when the xenomorph wakes up in the escape pod, that jump scare gets me to this day. Like I'm a 31-year-old
Oh yeah.
adult, and I it's
Yeah.
still, yeah,
Mhm.
100%. I love it. Great movie. What about you? Those are my snips.
Um I mean not I don't have anything really more
Okay.
other than I think like you said like as the movie goes they make a really good use of like the ship and like
Mm-hmm.
making it look one lived in to begin with, you know, but as it goes on you can tell like it gets grimier and grimier, they get sweatier and sweatier, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um and it just like a you know, watching Star Wars and 2001 and even Star Trek, like space didn't look like that. You know, space was pretty shiny to a
Mm-hmm.
certain extent. You
Yeah,
know, but they did a really good job of making it look and feel lived in. You
for
know,
sure.
which I think was
Yeah.
good for like a mining ship essentially. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this wasn't like a cool space travel ship. It was meant to be utilitarian, and I think they nailed that feel and look
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not talking about this movie, but talking about that, like, and you look at Aliens, which is a very like different mission.
Hmm.
Like they do a great job of building a completely different atmosphere, and yeah. Right. So Very well done. All right, that's it then. Let's hop into some categories and awards. Ready?
All right.
All right, starting us off. Has our buddy D Robs seen this movie?
I'm gonna say no, but I feel like he's more likely to have seen this one than a lot of the ones that we would probably drop.
I wrote a similar thing. I said actually maybe, but probably not. Like I still don't think he's seen it, but
I don't think he. I don't. I'm not. I don't think he likes scary movies.
but if we didn't tell him it was a horror movie, do you think he'd just get caught up in it and just like, oh, okay, cool?
Maybe. I mean, we could just say it's about an alien.
Yeah, it's only 50 years old. He doesn't know. 55.
He doesn't know. What does he know? Nothing.
He watches Jack Reacher. All right, number 2, the Disneyfication Award. So could this be a Walt Disney World attraction? And I kind of touched on it earlier. Like it literally was,
I was gonna
but
say. Well, I feel like we have this. It is a Disney attraction.
yeah, but I would go on a ride where that's all it was. Like I think a classic dark ride, kind of like an ET or like the
Hmm.
old Snow White, something like that. Like if you were just on a vehicle, just like going through scenes of the movie, like that would be awesome. I think that would be incredible.
Hmm.
Now, I don't think people would go on it because they would get scared like I did as a 6-year-old, but maybe it belongs at Universal, maybe not Disney.
Right.
All right. So trading places. If you could swap one actor or actress from this movie with anybody in movie history, who are you choosing and why? This
Um.
one was tough.
You go first.
Okay. Yeah. So I alluded to this earlier, but one of the things that I stumbled upon in the research is that the part for Ripley was actually originally written for a male. So, which I don't think that works. I just want to say, like, I love Sigourney Weaver in this movie. I think she does an incredible job, and it's just like just a great character. But if I were to go with the original how it was written, I was thinking, I was just looking back at like other 70s actors. I
Hmm.
think Richard Dreyfuss would have been kind of fun, and I think he would have fit, like he probably is a little too like fun and quirky maybe to
Right.
fit into the
Right.
cast, but I think he would have been good. Like and part of me is just thinking, like, I actually think, full disclosure, the only full movie I've seen with him in it is Jaws, but I love him in Jaws, and I think he's just kind of like um, I mean, a little bit of uh, just comedic relief, which is not Ripley at all. But I
Hmm.
think he, just because of the talent that he is, I think he would have fit in pretty well.
Hmm.
That's all.
Hmm.
You
This
can
one was
disagree,
tough.
or
No,
you
I
don't
think
have one.
that's a good choice. But I think I agree. I think not that he can't be serious. He obviously has been and is, but I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that may or may not have unintentionally lightened the tone. You know.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
So
Yeah, because we think we got some comedic relief with the maintenance guys, I
yeah,
thought. So
yeah,
maybe we didn't
yeah.
need more. But
Hmm.
what about you, banging your head with a pen over there?
This was a tough one because this is one of those movies, and even still, we talked about it with Saltburn. It's like there's just some movies you just don't want to touch it.
Don't mess with?
Like, don't
Yeah.
mess with this. But I um, have always been a pretty big Jeff Bridges fan, and I feel like
Mm,
him in the part of Dallas
okay. I
could have
like that.
been
Yes.
good.
Yeah. I like that. And I like that. I've always liked the Dallas character. Like I
Hmm.
always hated that he had to die. Like in
Hmm.
some other movies, like the captain is kind of like a prick, and you just don't really like him. But Dallas seems like a solid dude, He's a good
Right.
leader.
I think that makes it better. Like none of the characters are outright dislikable
Yeah,
outside of Ash to a
right.
certain point, and so that almost just makes it worse when they all eventually get it. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like that take. I love Jeff Bridges as well. So, have you seen Tron Legacy?
yeah,
He's great in that movie.
yeah. I know.
friend Aaron Lambert has only seen 0 of the Tron movies.
I thought he saw 2 and he didn't know that there was a 1. I think was it.
No, that's it. That is how it goes. But I'm gonna make fun of it anyways. All
It's
right,
like, you mean there's another one? Yeah, there's
the
another one.
original one. Yeah. Daft Punk was not the OG, pal. All right. National Treasure. If you could steal one prop, artifact, something from this movie, what are you stealing?
The entire derelict ship.
Just
The,
gonna
the
strap it
entire
on.
engineer ship. I'm strapping in where the jockey was. I'm pressing those things. We're taking off. And just seeing where it goes. Pulling an Elizabeth Shaw.
This is totally off base here, but in the documentary that you watched, did they use how much of the ships and things like that were models? Like, I mean, I guess most of it, but like how,
Most of it was real set.
When they land on like the other planet and do
Honestly.
some of that kind of stuff, like, what's going on there?
So they said most of it was like when they got on set, it's almost all real sets.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So like the space jockey is as big as it looks in the movie.
Dang. Although
go ahead.
I did see that Ridley Scott's kids were the ones jumping around in the suits to try to make it look bigger. I mean, it's still huge, but
it's still and that may also be the case, but it's not like you said, it's not a model, and it wasn't there wasn't any CGI or anything, obviously. So
right.
As far as I can tell, it was pretty much and H.R. Giger designed pretty much all of that.
Yeah, the practical effects in this movie are incredible. Like set design, everything. I mean, we didn't really talk about that much, but they did an incredible job kind of adding to the setting that way. So, all right, have fun hauling that back home.
Yeah.
This one was tough because honestly, I had like 4 things that I was like, man, I would be happy with all of these items.
You want an egg, don't you? You want to take a face hugger home, I bet.
Okay, there's 3 things I was thinking about taking home. That was number 1. I mean, it's iconic. It's a classic, right? Like the egg is cool, but I want to take home Brett's flower shirt. I'm just stealing that from his closet and I'm taking it home.
I actually almost said Parker's bandana.
Yeah, those guys are great. Yeah. I love it. I mean, and when I still worked on Fridays, I would wear flower shirts every Friday. It's like, man, this would be a nice shirt to wear to work on Flower Shirt Friday. But
oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, R.I.P. Flower Shirt Fridays. It is what it is. Close up there for me. Ripley's gun with like the flame coming out is freaking cool. I don't want to shoot anything. I just want to carry on a gun with a flame on it. But so all right, moving on. All right, the Hot Date Award. We had some confusion in the last one. I'm just gonna say that I still stuck with the confusion about what date means. Who are you going on a hanging out with? It could be bro date, could be like actual date.
So you're going with date. Am I correct?
No, I went with full disclosure, I went with 2 bro dates at the same time.
Well, that's what I did. Well, now I feel
You
dumb.
going with the maintenance dudes?
Yeah, Brett and Parker.
Heck yeah, same. Yeah.
I mean, I guess date obviously Ripley. Hang out,
right?
Then Brett and Parker.
Yeah, they're great. They're hilarious.
Dallas can come, I guess, if he wants, but I mean, gotta bring the vibe down.
Yeah, no, I don't want to hang out with Dallas. But if I could have sat down at that first breakfast after, like, that cereal they were eating looked real good. I would just settle with hanging out with all of them. But which I think is cool. Like, again, side, but that first scene where they're all sitting down together, they did a great job of kind of like just throwing us into like this group of people. Like, hey, we're going to introduce you to this cast, and I thought that was a pretty interesting way to do it.
Right. Yeah.
So, well, I like that we concur there. Very nice, very nice. So, this one, the GOAT award. Who won the movie? Who, I think this is a pretty easy answer probably for both of
Right.
us, but
I feel like there's no fun in picking this, I guess, but it's
mhm.
obvious it's Sigourney Weaver, it's Ripley.
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
um, yeah.
that's it. Yeah, she kills it. I think she I love how she kind of continues like that, the idea of the strong female lead. Like when
Hmm.
did Halloween came out, what, 77?
I think it was the same year. I think it was 78.
Same year. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So, you had Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, you've got Sigourney
It
Weaver
would
in
have been the
Alien.
year before because this was 79. They came out the year before, 78.
Okay. Yeah, I thought like, you know, we hadn't seen a ton of like strong female leads, especially
Hmm.
in like a horror franchise or anything like that, and I think Sigourney Weaver kind of alongside Jamie Lee Curtis, like it really kind of cemented that, and just with her acting and her just she was great.
Hmm.
Like with the scene at the very end when she's like looking to the side, like through the helmet to see the
Hmm.
xenomorph right behind her, it's incredible. Like you can see the look of fear like on her face, like she's
Right.
terrified.
Right. Yeah, and I think you do. I mean, bring up a pretty good point as well. Horror, for the most part, horror is a has historically been a pretty good genre to an extent for showcasing like female leads, um, and using minorities, like Night of the Living Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Making a black man the lead, and then also
Yeah,
having something to say about that also at the end. We won't spoil that in case we
yeah,
decide to do it. But like horror has always kind of been its own thing, and I really enjoy that. Um, this was one of the more developed, and it wasn't just a woman who made it. It was like a woman with like real development, and that like changed over the course
mm-hmm.
of the movie. It wasn't just like a woman, an arbitrary for the sake of having a woman survive.
Right,
Like her
right,
character was strong and smart and made it. So.
right. Yeah, yeah, because I think many times like they like she wasn't the focus of the movie until what, like the final third, basically.
Right.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it's really kind of focusing on, excuse me, the crew as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And like you kind of said, like you can see little like moments, right? Like when they're trying to bring Kane back on the ship, and she's like, "No, we're not abandoning
Mm-hmm.
protocol. Like this needs to happen." Showing some of that like that strength, courage. Like doing the right thing in that moment. Even like confronting Ash like multiple times, going in to talk to Mother. Like she becomes, even, well, she always is, but then finally when they bring her into the light as like the hero and the savior of the movie, like you're like, all right, she's here, this is it, that was great.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
all right, last category and slash award. So freshest take, what you got?
Mm. Freshest take.
Or like freshest like idea. I got one if you need to think about it.
You go ahead.
Okay. I, talking a little bit about the like, oh my gosh, I almost said constipation. That's not it. Claustrophobia. I had
Oh
to
my
go back and
god.
look for my words. Um, I love how my face still turns red on camera. Um, the claustrophobia, but like the idea of like a vessel as a setting for horror, in like a tight
Mm-hmm.
enclosed space. Like, a lot of horror movies, and you might disagree, you have a little bit more knowledge about like classic horror, but to my knowledge, like a lot of horror up to this point, it took place in like a house. It took place in like or just like a city or village, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. And there was always some kind of like semblance or like something that brought you back to reality and the civilization outside, right? But this like these people were like isolated, right? You know, the
Hmm.
whole crew is just like they're stuck on this ship, and I think like you know that that spawned so many other movies. Like I looked at an article. It was like these are 10 movies that were inspired by this concept, and I had not seen any of them, but some other ones that came to mind. Like I don't know if you saw the I think it was Jake Gyllenhaal, the movie Life from a few years
Yeah.
ago.
Hmm.
Like, that was basically like the exact same thing. The movie came
Yeah.
out last year, Last Voyage of the Demeter, like
Hmm.
the vampires like stuck
Leviathan
on the
is another
yeah.
one. It was basically underwater. It's basically
Yeah.
alien underwater.
Which that sounds awesome. I've never heard of that. I like it. But,
Yeah.
like yeah, add it to my watch list. Like that whole idea and concept, that was pretty new to my knowledge
Hmm.
anyway. So like that take that concept, that idea was new, and it spawned a lot of great stuff.
Hmm. Um, I think mine is one. I think one of the scariest scenes, not more so than the dinner scene, the chest burster, but
Mm-hmm.
along the same lines for me is when Kane is in the ship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're dropping down, and then he gets attacked or whatever, and he's just screaming and yelling and screaming and yelling, and then it
Mm-hmm.
just immediately cuts to the outside of the ship,
Mm-hmm.
and it's completely silent except for like the
Yeah.
wind,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like that to me. The whole movie really hinges on like the chest burster scene, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the if you want to boil the movie down to one scene and what it feels like and represents, it's like people going where they shouldn't go and don't know anything about and
Mm-hmm.
getting punished for it, but also just like the unforgiveness of space. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's three people's lives in there that are about to change forever. You
Yeah.
know, their knowledge of the world is about to change forever. But on the
100%.
outside, it looks exactly the same. There's nothing
Yeah.
happening. It's desolate. It's boring. It's like it's it's almost kind of nihilistic. It's like there's something very violent happening on the inside, but
Mm-hmm.
outside,
Couldn't
nothing's going
tell.
to change. It hasn't for
Yeah.
years, and it's not going to.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. No, that is pretty interesting. I like that. So cool, cool, cool. All right. Well, that does it for our categories and awards. Anything else like, I mean, I didn't have access to the documentary, kind of like in the making of, like
Hmm.
anything else that we didn't talk about that you just thought was like cool, interesting, like fun facts or anything that you came across.
Yeah, I could do a whole nother podcast on the documentary, to be honest. But
Mm-hmm.
I think something too is like we talk about Sigourney Weaver and Ridley Scott, rightly so, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the driving force behind the movie in its final form is really the writer Dan O'Bannon and H.R. Giger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I think at that somebody mentioned at that time, and even to this day, like writers don't get nearly as much input on how the final product comes out as like Dan O'Bannon had in this one. And it's his script. I mean, he had this script written. It went through like three different names. He'd had this written for years,
Hmm.
and was just waiting on somebody to
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 pick it
pick
up.
it up. And it was like
Huh.
the final. Ridley Scott was the final piece to the puzzle. It was like Dan O'Bannon and Giger knew each other, and so it was like there, but they couldn't get the studio to kind of get on board with everything,
Sure.
until Ridley Scott came on and was like, here's how we're going to do it. And we're going to do it this way, you know? So I just thought it was really interesting, like how much you don't think about the writers even, you know, a lot of times,
Yeah. Yeah. No, and
but,
that's a good point.
but realistically, this was down to even that one scene. This was all really Dan O'Bannon. Oh, and another guy. I think his name was, Shusett. I literally just watched it and I forgot it, but I think that
Classic.
was cool too. How much focus they put on O'Bannon as they did Ridley Scott.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, just while you're talking, I was looking up. Looks like this was this was one of Ridley Scott's first films too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm taking it back away from the writer because I'm one of those people that takes it away from the writers. You as a writer, I'm sure got to give your guys their due, but I think it's incredible what he was able to do with that, and I'm glad that he did, and we're thankful for the writers. We love the writers. So, all right, cool.
Yeah, all hail the writers.
Oh, that's going to be the title of this podcast. Uh, sorry, you don't get balloons.
It should be punk rock, is what it should be. It's not very punk rock of you, Michael.
You're right. Actually, that's good. I'll probably settle for that. All right, awesome. Well, if you guys, as the listeners, viewers, if you've made it this far, thank you. Right? Daniel and I appreciate all of the support. I know I've had countless people like tell me like, oh yeah, man, I'm loving it, checking in, trying to get ideas, and keep those coming. Daniel and I both like love getting feedback and love hearing your ideas.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I agree. And thanks again for listening. And we really will we love doing this, and so we really enjoy when we hear people enjoy hearing us talk about movies. We're only going to get better. Every time we do it, I even write down like things I wish I'd done or said differently. So like I'm constantly making changes to how I'm approaching doing this, which has been a fun process, and I'm excited to keep doing it. That documentary I was talking about, Memory Origin of Alien, it actually is free to stream on, I think, multiple streaming services. I think Prime is where I watched it. I think it's on Tubi, Crackle, maybe. It's pretty easy to find. You might have to watch a few ads or whatever, but it's still free to stream. And so,
don't mess with that. Also, and that reminds me, I didn't actually mention Alien is available for streaming on Max. So if you have a Max subscription, check it out. Daniel, I appreciate y'all. Please, keep
I think it was
ideas.
Hulu, wasn't it? It was Hulu.
Thank you for yes, it was.
God,
Aliens.
The one goal of this is to tell people where they can find good streaming movies, and you don't even know the service.
I just took phones out in
this is a nightmare.
I know. I suck. Like Dan said, we're only going to get better. I'm going to remember the streaming platform that our movies are on. So
I think what Michael meant to say is watch it on Hulu and then go to Max to watch the sequel.
Yes, which we'll talk about some other time. I'm going to make it happen. But yeah, if you guys have movie ideas, category ideas, things that you would like to hear about, we definitely want to hear it. Interact with us. Our podcast on Spotify or on YouTube. We have an Instagram account that I never post on that I'm going to do better at. But it's there. It's there. So yeah. You got something?
We have a lot of tools that we haven't really figured out how to utilize yet.
Yeah.
So
yes,
but again, we'll get better.
Marketing was not my major, so we're working on it. All right. Now this is podcasting.
Oh my God.
Crushed it.
Butchered.